Hey everyone, welcome to Jessistories. This is an inclusive space, so everyone is welcomed. And if you're part of the LGBTQIA plus community, you're definitely welcomed. And if you're new here, thanks so much for being here. I hope you enjoy my interview with Dr. Robin Stern. And please like, subscribe, and leave comments down below to help the algorithm. And now, Robin, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Jessi, for having me on your podcast. And I so enjoyed our talk and your story, so meaningful when you were on my podcast. And so I hope that this hour will be as meaningful for your listeners as ours was for my listeners. Thank you. I'm Robin Stern. I am the co-founder and senior advisor to the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I've spent over 3 decades in private practice as a licensed psychoanalyst, working with people, women, couples, families. And one of the areas that I focused on most was the ways that people hurt each other. And what emerged out of that was gaslighting. I coined the term in 2007, wrote a book called The Gaslight Effect. I coined the term the gaslight effect. Gaslighting was out there as a result of the movie 1944 with Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer, where a diabolical husband gaslit his loving, trusting wife into believing that she was going crazy, losing her mind. And if you watch the movie, which I recommend, you'll see that at the end, the tables turned a little bit. But he insisted on his reality, convincing her to question her own reality, which is what gaslighting is. And I recommend the movie. And that's where the term came from. But in my practice and in my inspiration to write the book, I was very focused on wanting people to understand what the impact was of gaslighting, which is, and we'll get there later, how I got to cults as well, the impact of gaslighting and narcissism as well on the people who are involved in cults. But there can even be a cult of two. And that's really what I focused my work on. The gaslight effect was about what happens over time when you're with someone who's constantly trying to turn the tables on you, constantly trying to insist that you're inadequate in some way, that you are misremembering, misperceiving, that there's something wrong with you. And because it's in a power dynamic, you've given over your power in some way at some point to this other person because you love them or you trust them, or they're your parent, or they're your cult leader, or they're your boyfriend or husband or girlfriend. Somehow you are set up psychologically to believe them, and at the very least to question yourself when they say something that's different than the way you feel. And it's very easy over time when there's a constant repetition of, I know what your reality is. You don't. There's something wrong with you. I know you better than you do. Something wrong with you. To begin to give up pieces of yourself and to begin to question, could he be right? Could they be right? Maybe I don't really know. Maybe I'm wrong to feel that. Maybe I shouldn't think that way. So it's insidious, repeated over time. And the special characteristic is there's a twist in the conversation. So just for the people who are watching, listening, let's say, Jessi, that we're friends and we speak regularly, and I say to you one day, Jessi, like, I haven't been able to reach you. Where have you been? And you don't want to answer that question, or you want to throw me off track. So you might say to me, what do you mean, where have I been? What are you, paranoid now? And so I might leave, if I'm vulnerable to being gaslit, I might leave the interaction thinking, yeah, maybe I am paranoid. Like, what's going on with me? Rather than, wait a minute, maybe I'm paranoid, but she didn't answer the question. I still don't know where she is, where she was, why she's not showing up in the way that we're used to. So that would be one small example of a gaslighting moment that could ultimately turn into a gaslighting dynamic repeated over time in a relationship. I'll stop there.
I actually have the questions right next to me. Oh, how long have you been studying gaslight and its effects in your career?
I would say I've been in practice for 35 years, and for all of that time, I was studying gaslighting one way or another. Even though I wasn't aware that I was studying gaslighting for some time. But I was watching people, particularly women, because it just happened that that was the way my practice evolved. I was involved in a women's institute. I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of, I was working in a lot of high schools, and I had a lot of women referrals. And people would come to my office, and women who were otherwise confident, self-assured, knowing who they were or saying they knew who they were suddenly insecure, second-guessing themselves, and feeling destabilized and unmoored. You know that feeling like if you're just like, can't really find your stability anywhere, right? Can't really find your anchor. And around that time, there were reruns of the movie Gaslight. And I thought, that's it. That's it. That is actually what's happening. It's as if somebody's saying, somebody's dimming the gaslight. Of course, the gaslight was the way that houses were lit at that point in time in Old England, which is where the movie was set. And then I say, we're living in that house, and we say, did you notice the gaslighting, the lights flickering? And somebody says, no, the lights weren't flickering. And then it happens again. And then it happens again. And you're thinking, what am I, like, seeing things? Or the person is saying to you, are you seeing things? You must be very tired. I was hearing things from my friend, like one of my friends had a conversation with her boss. And she was talking about feeling like she'd been left out of some important meetings, and that she wasn't on sales calls anymore, and things that had been part of her regular job were taken away. And her boss looked at her and said, come on, we know you're in menopause, right? Like maybe that's what's going on for you. Maybe you need to take a few weeks off and rest. Now, I don't know that that would fly anymore with current HR guidelines, but many years ago, that was an acceptable response from the perspective of the employer.
Gaslighting the employer, at least in my personal opinion. That's what it seems like.
It was a little bit intrusive, a little bit off, not his business, inappropriate, and not even true. And of course, not addressing the point. So it's been a long time, to answer your question. It's been a long time that I've been seeing the dynamic and really studying not only what the gaslighter is doing, but what is causing the gaslight to accept what the gaslighter is saying, to accommodate his or her way of being, way of thinking, thoughts about themselves to the way they're being presented by the gaslighter. What's happening? And one of the things that I was always fascinated by is how hard it is, even when you know, wait a minute, I'm being manipulated here, or it's not what I was asking, or the question's not being answered. Why is it so hard to walk away? Why is it even hard sometimes to take one step towards walking away? And many times in couples, what I would hear from my patients, things like, I can't stand it that he's constantly telling me I'm paranoid. Like, I'm not paranoid. He's just presenting information that would make anybody wonder. And I can't walk away. I can't leave until I get him to believe that I'm not paranoid. But that will never happen when you have someone who's committed to gaslighting you, or committed, like in a cult, to controlling you with gaslighting. It's never gonna happen that you're gonna prove them wrong.
Just have a comeback for everything you have, like not working hard enough. But that just makes me think of Jeff and Shlee with gaslighting.
Yeah. I mean, what's the matter with you? You're not working hard enough. If you're not feeling good, you're not working hard enough. Work harder, right? Work harder.
Yeah, it's your fault you're not feeling good. You need to do this. Well, in their case, the mirror exercise, like we went over on your
I
podcast.
remember you're talking about that, like such classic gaslighting. There's no way then in that situation where you can say, this doesn't feel right, because everything is, well, hold the mirror up. What's wrong with you? Everything is just about you and how you need to change and you need to accommodate, and you're seeing things incorrectly. There's no exchange ideas. There's only their ideas, and you're doing it wrong, seeing it wrong, feeling it wrong. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, because actually when I first got into Twin Flames universe, the very first thing, because I wanted to try to change up the way the mirror exercise went just for fun. And the second I tried that, they went, no, we have to do exactly as they said. You can't try to do it differently. It's either write it or like speak it.
So what did you want to do that's so interesting? What did you want to change up?
I wanted to look into, instead of turning it on yourself, really working on where that's coming from, but it also felt wrong in the first place to be just messing with something that isn't done by people that are in the field of psychology in the first place, since neither Jeff or Shalia have a PhD, since I know in order to clinically be able to do things like this, you need to have your PhD. Neither one of them have a PhD in psychology. Business and art have nothing. Well, it does have to do with psychology, but it doesn't have to do with helping others through PTSD and other things that psychologists actually have education and get checked through, I guess, a board of people. At least that's what
And
Dr.
not,
Shannon told me.
I mean, it doesn't sound to me like that, certainly doesn't sound to me that the people who were in charge had adequate experience in, or any experience at all, in really looking at themselves and understanding what their motivations were, and excuse me, and um, managing, like noticing what they were feeling when they were asking someone else to put a mirror up in front of their face, the other person's face. You know, like they weren't self-examined. And if they were, they weren't self-examined according to any way of my knowing what self-examine means.
Psychology would be good too. I personally believe that, at least because I only have my bachelor's, but you still go through a lot of education, and even I did make it to accidentally, which they let me take the class in for couples therapy. I got to do a practicum of couples therapy, so you do go through a lot of like being watched in a room and making sure you're doing the questioning correctly, and yeah. So I did learn a little through my college career in psychology, what it looks like when you're doing a practicum and what it looks like before you even are able to clinically practice and teach and help others through everything they're going through.
Of course, and part of training is going through your own therapy and going through, and if you're studying group therapy or working with groups, being in a group and having somebody more experienced working with you as you're the client or you're the patient, and helping you work out what's going on for you.
Where did your idea in the flight attendant come from?
The flight attendants. I don't like to fly, and I do fly. I fly a lot, actually, because I like to see different places in the world. But there was a period of time where it was very, very hard for me. Now, easier because I do it more often. But I like the metaphor of, you know, when I'm nervous, I'm always nervous. Interestingly enough, not really on takeoff and landing, but when the airplane is, or the aircraft is midair and just flying along. Even if there's no turbulence, I'm nervous because I'm thinking the next minute there could be turbulence. And then, of course, there's often a bumpy ride. And I look to the flight attendants, because if the flight attendants are continuing to serve coffee or serve a meal, I don't worry, and I can take a deep breath and relax. And if the flight attendants are hurrying up suddenly, then I'm thinking, all right, we're going to hit more turbulence. And these days, the pilots, I think it's wonderful, will often announce, we're going to hit some rough air, please buckle up, or you may have noticed that the seatbelt sign is on. But for me, that's like a signal that everything's okay if the flight attendants are okay, even if the seatbelt sign is on for the passengers. And if the flight attendants sit down, I'm a little bit more concerned, although I've made my peace with the fact that turbulence is just a bumpy road. But that's where the metaphor came from. Look to the flight attendants, and we all have our flight attendants. Our flight attendants may be those friends who we can call and say, hey, you know, this is going on in my relationship. I'm feeling a little destabilized or off my game. Like, what do you think? Like, you're my reality check. Or headaches, or stomach aches, or nightmares, or big feelings that seem to come out of nowhere, or anxiety that won't go away. All of those things are like signals that you need to look around your life and think, where does something not feel right? And often, most of the time, when you feel in interaction like something is wrong, something is off, it is. It is. And learning to trust yourself is a really big part of healing and stopping the gaslighting, or limiting the gaslighting or leaving the relationship.
Yeah, I like where that comes from. I'm also not a big flyer. I tend to have to take Dramamine. I get really, really motion sick easily. Even when I'm driving my own car, I get motion sick easily.
That's hard.
But I liked your analogy of the flight attendant when I read your book, which I read it as thoroughly as possible, which I think you did a really, really great job. And I like your opening before even going into the actual book itself of where the inspiration and the research came from, including yourself. I like that a lot.
It was kind of amazing actually, because, and thank you for the opening to talk about it, because it's not as if I sat in my office and was completely emotionally distant from the experience of questioning my reality. I mean, I'm a woman, so I was socialized, a woman who was brought up in the 50s and 60s. And so I was socialized always to please and to be nice and and of course, empathy. And empathy is such a wonderful place to be with someone, to be in tune with who they are and to stand in somebody else's shoes, as long as you don't get stuck in your without going back to your own shoes, so don't get stuck in a position where you're constantly in somebody else's shoes and not in your own shoes. I'll edit that piece, but it's an important thing. But I also was married to in a different lifetime to someone who was a really good guy, very pleasant to be around. People enjoyed his company, never raised his voice, wasn't a bully in the traditional sense of the word, but was a gaslighter. And particularly around the issue of time. So we would have a dinner. It would be Friday night dinner or another dinner, and he would say, I'll be home at a certain time. And he would always be late, but not just 5 minutes late, like a half hour late, and sometimes even more than that. Sometimes he would call and sometimes he wouldn't. And when we got to talk about it, I would say, oh, this doesn't feel good. Like, you're always late. And it's disrespectful to the kids, and it's disrespectful to me. And can you really try to do better? And he would say, you have a problem with time. And I said, what do you mean? Well, your parents are very rigid, and they taught you that it's really important to be on time. Like, why is it so important? What's the big deal? This is your problem. It's not mine. And so initially, when he would say that to me, I would think, no way. Like, no, sorry, you're late. We had an agreement. This is not cool. But over time, I began to think, because he was so persistent and so certain. And there were ways that my parents were rigid. That didn't happen to be one of them, but there were ways. So I could go back and say, okay, kernel of truth there. Maybe I didn't see that growing up. Maybe they taught me something that for other people just doesn't ring true. I wonder if another woman would be, or another partner would be really relaxed if her husband or her lover were home a half hour late, 40 minutes late on the regular. And I was writing my book at the time, and I thought, this is gaslighting. Like, this is that manipulation where I'm seeing something, I'm saying, I don't like this. And rather than the person, my husband, responding to what I'm saying, he's twisting, shifting reality to blame me. And rather than saying either, I'm sorry you don't like it, I'm just going to be late, or I just don't feel the same way, like, I don't care. I'll come home when I'm coming home, or I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just can't keep track of time. Any response to what I actually said, other than, you are the problem. And so I thought, when I was writing the book, that I really needed to include that, because it didn't destroy me. It concerned me. And yet the stories I was hearing from my practice really were much more devastating, where people really lost big pieces of themselves in accommodating to their spouse's reality, in feeling like there was something radically wrong with them because they weren't doing his bidding, or they were questioning him too much, or they were untrusting, or they weren't buying the right piece of salmon, was another story that I wrote about. Um, and I thought, if this is happening to me, even on a small scale, and I'm studying it, I need to write about it, because people need to be able to name this. Once they can name it, then they're not constantly walking around in this kind of confusion or fog, like, what is going on? He's such a good guy, but I'm miserable all the time. Or I just can't go through this roller coaster anymore. Or I don't think I'm that person, but my husband's telling me I'm that person. Maybe I'm not aware. And often people would come to my office when things were suddenly extreme enough that they seemed really off. Like one of the cases that I worked with, one of the women I saw came to my office at a point where the gaslighting had gotten so egregious. So here's the story. She had a boyfriend. They spent a lot of time in her neighborhood going out to dinner, and or just going out for walks. And her boyfriend accused her of flirting when people would greet her on the street, and she didn't think she was flirting, and they would argue about it all the time. And finally he said, here's the answer. When we're walking down the street, I'd like you to look at the sidewalk and not look up at people. That way people won't smile at you, you won't flirt with them back, and we won't be arguing. She thought that was not cool, but she did it anyway, and it worked. They stopped arguing. They weren't having these fights. They weren't having fights about whether or not she was a flirt, because she wasn't making eye contact with people on the street. And of course, I learned about this later when she came into my office, because her boyfriend had suggested to her that when they actually go to dinner, that she always choose a seat facing the wall, because if she faced a wall in the restaurant, nobody would have the chance to engage her in eye contact, and she wouldn't have the opportunity to flirt with that person. And so when he told her that, initially she thought, okay, this is messed up. But it wasn't until they had dinner with a friend of hers who pulled out the chair to sit down in that seat, or wanted that seat, and she said, no, 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 I have to sit facing the wall. And when she explained it to her friend said, that's crazy. That's crazy. And so she ended up in my office saying, Dr. Stern, do you think that's crazy? Like, it worked on the street. We're not fighting anymore. So why shouldn't I do that? But it didn't feel right to her. It felt like too much. And often people would come to my office, not at the very beginning of the gaslighting experience, but when it crossed some line for them, and it was too much.
And a book that came out of that too.
I didn't hear what you just said.
Sorry, I said at least they had You to Go To, and a book that came out of that too, which is a very helpful book for anyone. And link will be in description below. Let's see.
So I don't know if you have, like, I thought we were going till 12. I know that we started a little bit late.
We can also end it here too if we need to.
I do want to say one thing,
Okay,
which is that people who do gaslighting are not necessarily evil, diabolical people. They somehow either had a background that ended up with mental illness on their part, or learned it as a socially constructed behavior strategy that works. So maybe somebody was gaslighting them, maybe they witnessed gaslighting, maybe they happened into it at some point as a strategy to get out of, like, telling the truth. Like, where were you, Jessi? Like, I thought we were going to meet up. And suddenly you are forced to do something because you don't want to tell me where you were. Right? And so maybe you happened into gaslighting. Well, what's wrong with you? Like, come on, why did you call me so much? It's your problem. And so I think that it's important that people not automatically think all gaslighters are evildoers. Some of them have been targets themselves and victims themselves. And some of them have just learned it and no one's ever confronted them with it. Because if you're constantly using that as a strategy and you have a spouse, a friend, a child who's walking around the world thinking there's something wrong with them, and because they've been gaslighted, that's really true for many people, actually, sadly. Less so now that gaslighting is popular and they can name it. But if you don't confront the person, they have no reason to change if their strategy works.
Bring up that not, I guess, gaslighters are all bad and diabolical. I feel like some, just from my personal experience with Jeff and Leah, I count them as pretty diabolical.
Some
What?
are, right. Some are.
Some are, yes. And that's important to see the difference too, that there are the diabolical ones, and then there are the ones that you never know their background and where that came from, or if they were taught it or gaslit themselves, like you said. That's very, very true.
And
Um,
there are a lot of what can help distinguish the diabolical from not so diabolical is what's happening to you as a result. You know, are you giving up your life outside of that relationship? Are you giving up your dreams outside of that relationship where you're constantly feeling wrong? I mean, that lets you know that there's more diabolical intent, if you will, or sometimes even unconscious intent, but a need to control, a need to be right, a need to keep you under, to keep you down, and to keep you dependent. Strong need to keep you dependent. The other thing that I'd like to say, hope people will find this helpful, is that the reason I wrote the book was not just to categorize, not to categorize, was not just to make to write a book with a bunch of stories, but to help women or anyone feeling gaslighted, being gaslighted, dealing with gaslighting to feel empowered. That very often people would say, I can't believe you're saying it's like a gaslight tango where you have to participate as a gaslightee in order to make it work. It's not, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be gaslighted today and I'm going to just step in. But when a gaslighter, remember, this is insidious, it's not so direct. So a gaslighter offers you, maybe you're just paranoid. If you're not vulnerable to gaslighting, at that moment you say, no, I'm not paranoid. And even if I am, please tell me where you were. That's not an answer. Or we're going to have to agree to disagree. Sorry. But no, that's not who I am. Somebody who is less secure in that moment or more willing to create a little conflict or to live in that space where they might be incur somebody's anger is going to step into that gaslighting moment and say, well, maybe that's me. And if it is you, or if you're entertaining that feeling of maybe that's me, then you're leaving yourself open to gaslighting the next time and the next time and the next time. And knowing that is the first step to empowering your way out of it. Knowing that is the first step. Wait a minute. I just said, maybe that's me. It's not really me. Like, let me just get away from him for a moment. Let me take a weekend off. Let me go have a cup of tea. Let me spend a few minutes meditating, seeing where's my truth, right? And contacting the place inside of you where you know, not paranoid, you're not available. And I don't know what's going on, but it's not me. So the empowering piece is what I'm hoping that people can take away from my book as they reclaim their reality and stand in their integrity, like you did.
Absolutely does that and gives really good real life examples too. At least for me personally, I need real life examples. And I like it when any author even uses some of their own life examples in their books. That makes me more of want to read and continue reading more of their books. Um, but that's just me personally, but I really loved your book. And do you need to go somewhere because of time? Just doing a double check, so if I need to do the outro.
Yeah, so I thought maybe before the outro, even though I do have to go as well,
Okay.
Maybe I would just read.
Oh yeah, I would love you to read. Go for it.
List, what are the warning signs that you might be gaslighted? How's that?
I'd love that, honestly. That's my favorite.
So, are you being gaslighted? And here are these 20 telltale signs. You are constantly second guessing yourself. You ask yourself, am I too sensitive or am I too something, a dozen times a day? You often feel confused and crazy. You're always apologizing to your mother, your father, your boyfriend, your boss. You wonder frequently if you're a good enough girlfriend, wife, employee, friend, daughter. You can't understand why, with so many apparently good things in your life, you aren't happier. You buy clothes for yourself, furnishings for your apartment, or other personal purchases with your partner in mind, thinking about what he or she would like instead of what would make you feel great. You frequently make excuses for your partner's behavior to friends and family. You find yourself withholding information from friends and family so you don't have to explain or make excuses. You know something is terribly wrong, but you can never quite put your finger on it. You start lying to avoid the put downs and reality twists. You have trouble making simple decisions. You think twice before you bring up certain seemingly innocent topics of conversation. Before your partner comes home, you run through a checklist in your mind to anticipate anything you might have done wrong that day. You have the sense that you used to be a very different person, more confident, fun-loving, more relaxed. You start speaking to your partner through his assistant or secretary or colleague so that you don't have to tell him things that you're afraid may upset him. You feel as though you can't do anything right. Your kids try to protect you, or your friends try to protect you from your partner. You find yourself furious with people you've always gotten along with before. You feel helpless, and sadly, you feel joyless. So that's the end of that list. And that doesn't mean that you're in a gaslighting relationship, but those are the red flags for you to check in on your relationship to see if it is gaslighting. Because if a number of those things are going on, it's likely that you're living with a gaslighter.
So important to know those red flags because I don't think there's enough education out there on gaslighting. So I'm really happy that you've been doing this for 35 plus years of research and more. It's very much appreciated. And now I will do the outro of thanks so much for this interview, Dr. Stern. I appreciate it. And all the information that you shared with everyone. I hope they hopefully wrote down that list of red flags or will just buy the book down below, link down below. And wherever else Dr. Stern wants you to find her. Links will be down below. And embrace your truth, tell your story, like and subscribe. You have a story to tell. I have a story to tell. Till next Saturday. See you guys. Peace.
Thank you so much, Jessi. Really, it was a pleasure to be here and an honor to be part of your series of recordings for people listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.